uh, greetings, salutations, respect, and love to all my prog rock brethren. I am so excited to introduce to you guys the one and only, the great Aaron Clift from the Aaron Clift Experiment. Sir, I'm going to welcome you to the Prog Corner.
Hey, good to be here.
Tell my audience a little something about yourself and your band. I'm pretty sure some of my people don't know who you are. So if you just could tell us 5 things about Aaron Clift.
All right, so I'll stick with some of the basic facts then. Yes, my name is Aaron Clift. I am the vocalist and keyboardist and founder of the Aaron Clift Experiment. We're a progressive rock band based in Austin, Texas. And we just released a new album called The Age of Misinformation, and I'm so excited to talk to you about it today.
So this is actually your 4th album, your
That's
4th
correct.
studio album.
Yep.
I was just listening to the first album, Lonely Hills from 2012, and it almost sounds like an entirely different band. And as I started looking through the personnel, I realized that it kind of was an entirely different band. Have you had different personnel for all 4 of these albums, or do you have some recurring members?
We've had some carryover, but yeah, it's a different lineup with this album. But I'll also say that in the 10 years that we've been doing music, I've grown and changed a lot as an artist. So
Yeah.
even though I've been the constant member of the band that bears my name, I feel like every album has been a big growth and evolution for me too.
So now you guys just are fixing to drop The Age of Misinformation, right? That's the title of it. It's your 4th album. That artwork is so striking, man. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I really think just right from the get-go, that striking image is really going to help this record a lot. Who put that thing together? Because it's really impressive.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was blown away by the artwork too. So I was looking for a particular kind of artist for this album, and I started just going to people I knew in Austin and asking them, hey, who have you worked with who's really good? And I went on a Facebook group for Austin musicians, and the same answer kept coming up over and over. It's Fumihito Sugawara. He has a site called Fuman Studios, but uh, I met him. He was so nice. I talked to a couple other artists, and what struck me about Fumi was, I explained to him what the concept of this album is. I said, "The Age of Misinformation is an album about lies versus truth," and I said it has some political themes, it has some personal themes, but it's really about this idea of the lies and misinformation that are out there, and how can we find a way to move beyond them. I told him a couple more things about the album, and I sent him the demo recordings and said, listen to these.
Yeah.
Here's the lyrics, and see if you can come up with a concept for the front cover based on the title track. So he, a week later, he came back to me. He showed me the sketch of. He called it Birdman. So this guy is it's a bird, and he's in the cage, and he's got the blindfold over him, and I looked at it and was like, that is really cool. That's very original. I said, where did you come up with that? He's like, I don't know, but I call him Birdman.
The Birdman. Let's see if I
Yes.
can put that image up on the screen without messing people up too bad here. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh,
And
that's really hot. That is such a striking image, man. That is really, really cool. I love
did
that.
send him we had a Pinterest mood board going on, and with the Pinterest mood board, I showed him some artwork from a couple other bands and artists that I liked, and said, I'd like to do something that has a simpler color palette than some of the stuff we worked with before for a variety of reasons, and I think that was really a key. And having fewer colors gave us the ability to do more in some ways. I've said this to people. It's funny, like, you as an artist, sometimes like having limitations breeds creativity.
Sure. Yeah. And you can see that sometimes when a band streamlines from a 5-piece to a 3-piece, all of a sudden everybody has to, chip in a little bit more, and they get a little bit tighter with what they're doing. Now, doing some research on you, listening to your music and trying to figure out exactly where you're coming from. You take a little bit of a different angle towards prog. I mean, I know that your background, you actually listen to a lot of grunge, and we're finding some connecting points between bands like Alice in Chains or Soundgarden or Stone Temple Pilots and some of the greats of the past. How did listening to grunge and listening to that prepare you for what you're doing now, if at all? Because I personally believe all those aforementioned bands are progressive, maybe not capital P prog, but a lot of progressive stuff in that music.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Soundgarden Super Unknown was the first album I ever bought, and it's still
Wow.
my favorite album.
Wow.
I can go back to that album a million times
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and find details, but
I'm a down on
from
the upside guy myself, but
yeah,
those two albums to me are unimpeachably great.
yeah. No, I saw them on that tour. It was also my
Yeah.
first rock concert.
Mm.
So, 14, 15-year-old Aaron absolutely adored that stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the music a lot of my peers were listening to at the
Sure.
time. So, they kind of like, it was the peer thing, like, oh, this is cool. But I heard Soundgarden. I mean, for me, the first thing that attracted me to all these grunge bands, and their songwriting's phenomenal. Like all the great ones had amazing
Yeah.
songs,
Yeah.
but
That is true.
it's not just the songs and the guitar riffs and everything, but it's also the voices. Like Chris Cornell is my favorite
Mm.
vocalist.
Mm.
Lane Staley, like all those guys were just incredible talents, and
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't see that necessarily in a lot of bands these
No,
days,
no, you
where
really don't. I mean, the story goes that the A&R guy at A&M heard some of the old sub pop stuff, heard Chris Cornell's voice, one of his underlings brought it to his attention. And the story goes, he heard like about 5 seconds of Chris singing and it said, sign him, period.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
Those voices don't come around every day.
I would have felt the same way, but so I got into that music, and I grew up in around music. My parents used to play LPs for me when I was a baby, and my
Right.
mom always reminds me that and likes to tell the story that one of my first words was "side," and that was my word for music because I had to flip the LP over to the other side.
I
So
love it.
they played a lot of kids stuff for me, but they also played me stuff from their own collection. So I grew up hearing the Beatles. I grew up hearing Bob Dylan and the Police and stuff like that. And it was always part of a background for me. And my dad himself he played piano,
Oh,
French
did he?
horn, and vocals. So I was kind of immersed in music. So it always appealed to me. But grunge was like the first style I got into on my own.
Now you're
And
classically trained, though. I mean, I don't want
that's
my
right.
people to think you're just some kid that listened to some grunge and later on
Yeah.
decided to form a band. Now you actually studied music, right? You were a music major,
hmm
what, violin or viola
Viola.
and voice.
Viola was my first
Okay,
instrument, yeah. And
wow,
then I got into voice and keyboard later. But
okay,
listening to Chris Cornell was one of the things that made me want to be a singer. But to your earlier question, I think for what got me into prog was actually from grunge.
yeah,
I was so into these bands that I was excited, and I wanted to play it for my dad. So I remember playing Soundgarden for him, and he thought it was pretty cool. And he said it reminded him of Black Sabbath. So he
okay,
went into his LP collection, got Master of Reality, and played it for me. And I hear the first few seconds of Sweet Leaf. I'm like, whoa, this is heavy,
yeah,
really heavy. And I was like, it reminds me of Bad Motorfinger, or should I say the other way around?
or maybe the other way around. Exactly.
Yeah,
I remember
exactly. And then
People Magazine reviewed Super Unknown, and the reviewer for People actually said that if Paul McCartney was in Black Sabbath, that
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
it'd sound a little like that. That's pretty high praise, actually, if
Yeah,
you think
and
about
the
it.
band in Soundgarden has covered the Beatles and Black Sabbath before, so
Really?
yeah, it
Okay.
is fitting. but yeah, then I played Alice in Chains. I played him a song from Jar of Flies, and he's like, "Oh, you should check out Crosby, Stills, and Nash with those
Nice.
harmonies." He
Yeah.
plays me "Sweet Judy Blue Eyes," and I'm like,
Mm.
"Oh, this is
Oh
great."
yeah.
So then I got into that, and then he played Jethro Tull Aqualung for me, and then he also had a copy of ELP's Tarkus.
Oh boy.
And the cover, you talk about cover art. I saw the
Yeah.
cover of like this armadillo tank. I'm like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't know it was called progressive rock. I just knew at that time I just called it
Yeah.
weird dad music. But I
Exactly.
liked it, and it kind of stuck with me for a while. And then when I was um, when I was 15, one of my friends in high school uh, told me he knew that I loved classical music and that I was playing in the orchestra, and he knew that I liked grunge and a lot of this and the Beatles and a lot of that stuff. He's like, "You should listen to Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon."
Uh-oh.
He said it'd be right up your alley. And I listened to it and I was like, "Yeah, this is great." And I wanted to find out more about this, so I asked around my peers, and nobody seemed to know
No.
anything about any of this stuff.
Uh-uh.
So I took the unprecedented step of using my crappy dial-up internet connection from back in the day, and there was no Google or anything. So I think I
Right.
did a search in like AOL or something for music, and the first site that popped up was All Music Guide. I'm like, okay. So I go to All Music Guide. I look up Pink Floyd, and I get this information about Pink Floyd and this style of music called progressive rock.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. What is
progressive
this?
rock? What is progressive about it? So I look
Yeah.
it up, and it like combines classical and rock music. And I'm thinking to myself,
Mm.
like a fifth
Yeah.
of Beethoven from the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, where they do the disco version of
Yeah.
Beethoven's Fifth. We had that album. I used to listen to it, but then I find out there's a little more to it than that. I look up who are the other bands, right? So one of the bands they list is Genesis, and I'm like the I Can't Dance guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now you're really confused.
I'm really confused because I liked the song I Can't
Sure,
Dance. I
but
thought, man, that's a great pop song. I still love that song, but I thought, and then they say Peter Gabriel was in the band. I'm like, the Sledgehammer guy was
yeah.
in
Yeah.
was
I'm
in
not.
Genesis.
It's not making any sense to you at
Yeah,
this point.
all the stuff was like, and then they're like recommend Sailing England by the Pound. I'm like, okay, I wrote that down, and then I write down a number of other
Yeah. Yeah.
classic,
Oh, you
awesome,
gotta have it.
nice. So I write down a lot of other classic bands, right? And I go to the music store and I look around to see if I can find any copies of used copies of these albums. I came back with Selling England by the Pound by
Mm.
Genesis, Images and Words by Dream Theater,
Yeah.
and Every Good Boy Deserves Favor
Oh
by the
yeah.
Moody Blues. I
Nice
already
one,
knew,
two, three punch right there.
yeah, and I knew who the Moody Blues were
Right.
because my dad had Days of Future Past, so I used to hear of Nights in White Satin, and I thought that
Sure.
was a great song too. But yeah, that was my introduction to
Wow.
progressive rock, and
Wow.
it's funny because I heard these songs and I started drawing parallels with the grunge bands that I was into
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Soundgarden used unusual time signatures. They used
Hmm.
unusual like chord progressions,
Yeah.
like unusual song structures. They were doing stuff that harkened back to those bands. And
Absolutely.
Alice in Chains was doing it. Like all those guys were doing that stuff. But that was my early introduction to it, and it stuck with me ever since.
And I think honestly, I hear all of that in the new album. Everything you're saying, all those different influences, it's all swirling around there. Yeah, I'm just really impressed with it. And I gotta say, the album that the song that really stood out for me on the new album is Malaga, and I just love the motoric beat going on that track. And then it made me think, wait a second, the first album had a song called My Andalusian Love. I'm like, do you have some weird connection with Spain here
I
going
do.
on?
I was a Spanish major in college, Spanish and music, so I double majored.
Okay.
So I
And
love
that's a great
history.
song too, by the way.
Thank you. I love history and I love travel. And when I got to Tufts University, I originally thought I was going to be an international relations major, but music was kind of secondary for me at the time. I had just come from high school and I was singing in choirs and I was viola, and I thought, well, I'll just take some music classes for fun. I had a little bit of room in my schedule. I take one music theory course, and boom, that becomes like, oh
Uh-oh.
my God, I just peeked under the hood of the car, and I want to
Yeah.
see how it works. And
Yeah.
that opened up my ears to so many different things. But at the same time, I was wanting to become completely fluent in Spanish. I wanted
Right.
to spend some time in a foreign country, so I did a study abroad in Spain,
Oh, nice.
and that was I had traveled all over the country, but uh, for Malaga, the influence on that one was 3 years ago. My wife and I, for our first wedding anniversary, took a trip to Spain, and we spent most of our time in Madrid. But one of my friends who was from Madrid had moved to Malaga,
Mm,
and he
beautiful.
encouraged us. Yeah, he encouraged us to visit him. And I look at the map, and I'm like, that looks pretty far away.
Yeah.
I mean, like, everything's a lot closer in Spain, but I compared it to a map of Texas. I'm like,
It's
that would
really
be,
not, because I took a Greyhound from Algeciras to Madrid, and it seemed
yeah.
to take forever, bro. So
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
know what
mean,
you're
like
talking about.
for me, it would be like driving from Austin, which is in the middle of Texas, to Brownsville, which is the
Yeah.
very southern tip. But that would have been like, a 7 or 8 hour trip. But he's like, no, 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 no. There's a high speed train that goes there. You can
Oh, there
get
you go.
there. So we got there in 4 hours, and we ended up doing a day and a half there. He let us stay at his apartment, but um, he took us for a drive from the city to his place. He lives so Malaga's on the southern coast
Yeah.
of Spain, and it's a mountainous region. I mean, most of Spain is pretty mountainous, but this is super dramatic. Like, you drive along the coast, and you got mountains to your left as you're heading east, and then on your right is the sea.
Yeah.
And so we were driving down, and there's just these beautiful views everywhere. And being being interested in history, I was really struck by the history of the place, and reading about all the different cultures and civilizations that had been there.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I wrote the song, and it was meant to be kind of almost like this feeling of, your amazement of all the history that's there, but also thinking about, when I think about history, what I like about studying it is what can we learn from the past and take with us to the future. And so that's what the lyrics kind of get into.
It really comes across too. I mean, I really feel it. And yeah, what a great track. Uh, I don't want to go on too long. We could talk for hours and hours, and I think it actually is counterproductive to the views, and I'm horrible at editing. So, real quick, I wanted to talk to you about Big Wide's brass band. Shows up on that epic Bet on Zero track. Really, really cool. How did that come about? It was a little bit out of left field, but I loved it.
Yeah, it was kind of a left field adventure for all of us, but the way that one came about was, I grew up listening to jazz music too. I've always been really into a lot of that stuff, and it's funny. Well, when I was a teenager, I wasn't so much into it. I kind of viewed it as like my grandparents' music,
Right?
but
Yeah.
then once I got to college and I started studying music, it kept coming up over and over, like, oh, you got to listen to Miles Davis, you got to listen to John Coltrane, like, and I started listening to that stuff with an open mind, and it really, like, that was the next thing for me. It was like, okay,
Nice.
so I've always been interested in the harmonies and the structures of jazz and some of the approach to it, but I had never really found a way to incorporate it into Aaron Clift Experiment's
Yeah.
music. Maybe just in some very tangential ways, but for me, I was just listening to a lot of jazz. I was starting to listen to more big band stuff, and sometimes when I go for a walk and I just clear my mind, and something will pop in my head, and I have my phone with me, so I'll sing it into my phone. And I go for a walk, and I have this riff in my head, which is there's like a breakdown section in the after the drum solo
Right.
in Bet on Zero, and that bass riff kind of crept into my head, and I was listening, and I was like, this kind of has like some sort of jazzy energy to it. I get home, get to my keyboard and transcribe it, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell rhythm it's in, and it turns out to be in a really complicated time signature. But I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. I developed a Then I developed the bass line for the rest of the song, and had a vocal in mind. So the bass and the vocal served as kind of the foundation of it.
Yeah.
I presented it to my band at the time. This was like late 2019. Our former drummer Chase told me that he reminded me. He's like, I'm in Big Wise brass band. I play percussion with them, and
Okay.
he's like, you should totally do a collaboration with them if you want to
Nice.
do something jazzy. He's like, they would be down for that.
So
So
we're gonna blame the ex-drummer.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I approach Will Wright, who's the trombonist and leader of the group, and tell him that I'm interested in doing a collaboration with him. He's like, "Oh, totally, I'd love to do that."
Cool. Now, did you
And
transcribe all that, or
I
did you
did.
have
I wrote
help
all
with
those.
that?
Yeah, I wrote all those parts. So I
Wow.
asked him. I said, what's your instrumentation? Like, what would I be working with?" And he's like, "Well, we got 3 trumpet players, we got 2 trombonists, and uh, then he mentioned to me, he's like, I also got, if you want to do like saxophone, I'd recommend like alto and baritone sax." I'm like, okay,
And you
seven,
see, your mama told you music theory would
yeah.
never come in handy,
Well,
right?
I have like on my shelf back there, I've got I got an orchestration book. So I had done some full orchestra stuff,
Yeah.
like so I'd done some brass arranging for classical, but never in a jazz context. So I'm
Right.
like, okay, I've got some research to do.
Yeah, a little
I go
different,
back,
right?
and I was really inspired by like some of Duke Ellington's orchestration. I'd always been a huge fan of him. Charles Mingus too.
Yeah.
So I listened to like a lot of those guys, and just to kind of absorb it into my head, and I really wrote everything around that bass and vocal part.
Right.
So that was a fun challenge for me. I got to try and figure out how to arrange for all these different clefs, and
Exactly. It's not
being
as
more
easy as you
comfortable.
think.
Yeah,
Actually.
and for me, like strings and voice are like my bread and butter. That's what that's what I grew up being more familiar with, like
Yeah.
how to do that stuff. So I had to go back to my orchestration book a few times and be like,
Oh, I'm
okay,
sure.
make sure it's idiomatic, make sure it's in the range, make sure it's
Yeah.
comfortable, make sure it feels good. I presented it to Will, asked him to look through, and he's like, "Yeah, no, this is great. We can do all this."
No,
So
it's really great. Everybody, you need to check out the new Aaron Clift Experiment album, The Age of Misinformation. It's their 4th album. The guys put in a whole lot of heart and soul and blood and sweat into this project, and it's actually really good. So, man, I'm so happy to have you on here today. Anything else you want to share with the Prog Corner audience today, Aaron, before we let you go and enjoy your Sunday?
yeah, so we just released The Age of Misinformation on January 6th. It is available on, if anybody wants to check out and learn more about the album, and get our excellent merchandise. Our web address is www.aaronclift.com. It's AARONCLIFT.com. And our website is the only place in the world where you can get not only we sell the CD plus digital download combo. So if you get the CD, you also get the digital download, or you
And
can get
I will put the link to the website in the description, so everybody can go on there and check it
excellent.
out. You also do have a Bandcamp
Mhm.
page. Is there a merch available via Bandcamp, or are you recommending they just go to your site?
I'll tell you to go to the website for a couple
Okay.
of reasons. Number one is it's the only place to get the merchandise
No,
items,
that's all I need to hear.
and I
We
always,
need to move some units, Aaron. That's what we're
yeah,
all about here.
and I always tell people, if you want to support an artist, the best way to support them is their website, because that's the way that artists make the best money from their stuff. Bandcamp is nice for what it does for artists, but it
Right.
takes a large cut.
Yeah, they do.
We do have autographed. So you mentioned the artwork for the album. Fumi did an amazing job, not only illustrating the cover art and the album art. He also did, since we released Bet on Zero as a single, he did artwork for that one too.
Oh, wow.
And we have some 12 by 18 posters that he's autographed and numbered, so they're limited edition. We've got those. We have a deck of playing cards that
Oh,
you
that's
can
cool.
get with the Bet on Zero artwork on the back
Oh,
of it.
Nice.
Hold on, I've got one right here. I'll show you.
Oh, yeah, we got to see that before you go. That we definitely have to see. Because, you know, anytime an artist is doing something a little bit different, okay.
So that's the poster.
That's
and then,
sweet. That's
then
sweet.
The playing cards are in this this little white tuck box, but you can see here there's
that's fantastic.
And then there's
fantastic
the
and very timely for anybody that's as obsessed with Netflix's Alice in Borderland as much as I am. The playing cards are a big part of that show. Anyway, Aaron, man, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure having you on here with us today. Congratulations on the Age of Misinformation. Fantastic record. Much luck. I'll let you have the final word.
So thank you everyone for tuning in and checking this out. And love to have you listen to our new album. Scott, thank you so much for having me.
Aaron, fantastic. Thanks for being here. And anyway, definitely check it out. It's really good. And I will see everybody soon. Thank you, Aaron. You guys are the best. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Aaron.
Bye.
Bye now.